All right, strap in, everybody. Today we are going deep with someone who's known for some pretty bold opinions.
Yeah, this one's gonna be interesting.
We're talking about Robert Kiyosaki. I mean, everybody knows Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Oh yeah.
If you are trying to get your finances in order, if you're trying to learn about money, chances are you've at least heard of that book, if not read it. And we are diving into a recent interview he did on this YouTube channel, Dad Saves America. And wow, this guy does not hold back.
He does not mince words, that's for sure.
So we're going to unpack that interview, see what we can learn, see what we agree with, see what we disagree with. But first, just to remind everyone, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, it's kind of this classic in the world of personal finance. It's all about how Kiyosaki learned about money from, well, his dad, who wasn't rich, and then from his friend's dad, who was. And he really contrasts those two approaches.
It really challenges the traditional view of, like, going to school, getting a job, working for someone else. He's really pushing entrepreneurship and building wealth through assets.
And I gotta say, in this Dad Saves America interview, he's definitely bringing that same energy. He even throws out this word, catastrophe. He's like, a financial catastrophe might be on the horizon. And he's pointing to a few things.
Oh, he's pointing to a lot of things.
Like what?
Like a lack of what he considers real financial education. These huge, Drakey demographic shifts that are happening right now. Oh, and of course, his favorite, excessive money printing.
Okay, excessive money printing, I kind of get that. But what are these demographic shifts he's so worried about?
He's talking about, the baby boomers, that whole generation hitting retirement. And Kiyosaki seems to think, that they've had it kind of easy compared to younger generations. But now they're all retiring, and a lot of them aren't prepared.
So they're hitting this retirement crisis.
Retirement crisis is what he's predicting, yeah.
And it all comes down to how they've been saving, right?
Exactly. He's especially concerned about this heavy reliance on 401ks.
He's not a fan of 401ks. But tons of people have 401ks. What's his problem with them?
Well, to get that, you got to look at how pensions used to work. Back in the day, you had these things called defined benefit plans. You put in your years, you knew exactly what you were going to get each month when you retired. No matter what the stock market did, you were guaranteed a certain income for life.
Okay, that sounds pretty nice. So what's wrong with a 401k?
A 401k is a defined contribution plan. You put money in, hopefully it grows, and then you use it in retirement. But here's the catch. All the risk is on you. If the market tanks, your retirement savings could disappear.
So Kiyosaki is worried that this whole generation has been putting their faith in a system that's tied to the stock market performing well.
And he thinks the market is in trouble.
Which is where that whole Noah's Ark going down analogy comes in.
Yep. He's basically saying, like, hey, this ship is sinking, and a lot of people are clinging to life rafts that might have holes in them. Not a pretty picture.
So pretty gloomy stuff so far. Is there anything people can do?
He definitely thinks so. And he keeps hammering on one major point. He says the biggest financial literacy blind spot out there is understanding financial statements.
Really? Even for people who, went to business school or got fancy degrees?
Even then. He even says something like, a PhD and $25 will buy you a cup of coffee. Like, all those credentials don't necessarily translate into financial smarts.
Okay, so what are these financial statements we need to understand? Is this like balancing my checkbook?
Think bigger. Imagine you want to invest in, a local bakery. Financial statements are how you get a real look at how that business is doing.
Okay, I'm listening.
The income statement, that tells you if they're actually making money selling all those pastries. Are they selling enough to cover costs and actually turn a profit?
Makes sense.
Then you've got the balance sheet. It's like a snapshot of what they own, their assets, like ovens, ingredients, all that, versus what they owe, their liabilities, like loans or debts.
Okay, so assets versus liabilities. Got it.
And finally, you got cash flow. This is huge GE. It shows you if money's consistently coming in or if they're always scrambling to pay the bills.
So Kiyosaki's saying that to be financially savvy, you can't just wing it. You need to be able to look at these statements, actually read them and understand what they're telling you.
It's about making informed decisions. It's about seeing beyond the surface.
Okay, that makes sense. And speaking of investments, Kiyosaki has some pretty interesting views on, what actually qualifies an asset. For instance, he says a house, which most people consider their biggest asset, isn't really an asset at all.
Yeah, this is where he throws a bit of a curveball. Right.
Most people think of their home as this valuable thing they own.
But his definition is all about cash flow. An asset, according to Kiyosaki, it puts money in your pocket. A liability takes money out.
But wait, hold on. I mean, even if I'm paying a mortgage, I'm still building equity, right? Isn't that putting money I in my pocket eventually?
He acknowledges that homes can appreciate in value, but he's focused on the here and now. You're paying your mortgage every month, property taxes, insurance, repairs. All that stuff adds up. It's money going OUT.
So even if a house might be worth more down the line, it's not actively generating income.
It's costing you money every single month. And he wants people to think differently. Think about building assets that actually bring in income, like businesses, for instance, or income-producing real estate.
So definitely a mind shift, and I'm guessing he probably has some strong opinions about other types of investments too.
Oh, you know he does. And some of them might surprise you, like his take on derivatives, for instance. He calls them packages of debt masquerading as assets. And he blames them for playing a major role in the 2008 financial crisis.
Derivatives. Okay, that sounds kind of intimidating. Can you, like, explain that in a way that makes sense?
He actually uses this analogy of an orange, which is kind of funny, but it helps. Imagine the orange itself is the original asset.
Okay, an orange. Got it.
Then you've got things like orange juice or orange peel. Those would be derivatives of that asset.
Okay, I follow. But how did oranges lead to a financial crisis?
Okay, so in the years leading up to 2008, banks were bundling up mortgages. And a lot of these were risky mortgages given to people who, probably shouldn't have gotten them. And they were selling them as these complicated derivatives.
So they're taking these potentially BAD loans, packaging them with a bunch of other stuff, and selling them as something valuable.
Exactly. And at the time, housing prices were going crazy. Everyone thought these mortgage-backed securities were a sure thing. But when the bubble burst and people started defaulting on their loans, those derivatives suddenly became worthless.
Like a house of cards collapsing.
Exactly. And it triggered this domino effect that, well, it brought down the whole financial system.
Which is why Warren Buffett called them weapons of mass financial destruction, right?
Yeah,
Right.
because they magnified the risks in the system and led to a global meltdown.
So Kiyosaki is basically saying, hey, be careful what you invest in. Understand what's really underneath all the fancy financial jargon.
And this is a theme with him.
Right.
Understanding what's actually happening with money. Don't just blindly trust the experts.
So far, we've got economic warnings, unconventional investment strategies, and a lot of bold statements. But he does offer some solutions, right?
He does. And it all goes back to his philosophy of building assets and using debt strategically, which, not everyone agrees with.
And didn't he buy his first condo in Hawaii, like with a credit card?
Classic Kiyosaki.
Yeah.
He's all about breaking the mold.
Not afraid to take risks,
Yeah.
but there's got to be a downside to that, right?
Oh, definitely. We'll talk about that later.
Yeah.
Leverage, using debt. You can amplify gains, but it can also magnify losses.
A double-edged sword. Okay, so we've got warnings, strategies, risks. But he throws in another ingredient for success, and this one surprised me. Emotional intelligence. Why are emotions so important when it comes to money?
Well, think about it. Fear can make you miss opportunities.
Mhm.
Greed can lead you to make impulsive choices that you regret later.
So how do you get better at that? What does it even mean to have good emotional intelligence with money?
That's a great question, and I think it starts with
No.
self-awareness,
Mm-hmm.
recognizing your own emotional triggers,
Yeah.
right? Like what sets you off when it comes to money?
So if I tend to freak out when the market dips.
Exactly. Or if you get caught up in the hype and start, chasing those hot stocks.
Okay, yeah, I've definitely been there.
We all have. But if you can recognize those patterns, you can start to put some safeguards in place.
So what? Having a plan?
Exactly. A solid investment plan can help you stay grounded,
Yeah.
keep you from making those emotionally charged decisions. And that's where patience comes in.
Oh, patience. Easier said than done, right?
Right. It's easy to get caught up in the get rich quick mentality.
Yeah.
But real wealth, it takes time. It's a long game.
Yeah, those headlines about people making millions overnight, they don't help.
I know, right? They make it seem so easy. But that's often how people get burned, chasing those quick returns.
It's about being disciplined, sticking to your plan.
Exactly. And, even if you do make a mistake, and everyone does, don't beat yourself up about it.
Didn't Kiyosaki compare it to, a baby learning to walk?
He did. You're going to fall down a bunch of times before you get it right. It's part of the process.
Okay, so emotional intelligence, patience, discipline, got it. But you know where Kiyosaki really gets people fired up?
Oh, I know exactly where you're going with this.
His views on communism versus capitalism, he does not hold back.
Nope, not at all. He even goes so far as to call economics a religion, with communism and capitalism as like opposing belief systems.
Strong words. And he's got some pretty personal stories that have shaped his perspective.
Yeah, like growing up in Hawaii, his dad was a big union guy, strong advocate for workers' rights.
And get this, during a union strike, Kiyosaki actually worked for his witch dad, the guy who inspired his whole financial philosophy.
Wow, talk about being caught in the middle.
His own father even called him a scab for crossing the picket line. Intense family dynamics.
That's got to leave a mark. But it really shows you how deeply ingrained these beliefs can be and how they can clash.
And Kiyosaki connects this all the way back to Karl Marx, the Communist Manifesto. He even argues that taxes are a tool of communism.
Now, it's important to remember that he's presenting a specific point of view here. Communism and capitalism are both complex systems. It's not always black and white.
Right, we're not here to endorse any particular ideology. We're just trying to understand Kiyosaki's perspective.
Exactly. So just to give a little context, communism, in its purest form, it's about a classless society where everyone shares ownership of resources, wealth is distributed equally.
No private property, everyone working for the common good.
Right. Capitalism, on the other hand, it's all about individual freedom, private ownership. It's based on a free market where prices are set by supply and demand.
So competition drives innovation. At least that's the idea.
Right. But in the real world, things aren't usually so clear-cut. Most countries have mixed economies combining elements of both.
So it's a spectrum. And Kiyosaki definitely sees himself on the capitalist end of that spectrum.
He's all about individual responsibility, entrepreneurship, and he's very vocal against high taxes, which he sees as a form of wealth redistribution.
So whether you agree with him or not, it's definitely food for thought, makes you think about the role of government, how different economic systems play out in the real world.
Absolutely. He's sparking a debate, and that's a good thing.
Speaking of sparking debate, Kiyosaki brings up another interesting point. He says it's tough to find good financial mentors.
Especially in a world full of, like, get-rich-quick schemes and people just trying to take your money.
Yeah, didn't he have one of those, like, self-proclaimed gurus on his podcast?
He did, and he called him out right there on the show for giving terrible advice. It's a good reminder to be skeptical, do your research before trusting anyone with your money.
And he tells this story about, like, buying a book from a guy selling it out of the trunk of his car.
Oh, yeah, I remember that one.
The book was full of these secrets to getting rich, but Kiyosaki quickly realized it was all bogus.
A classic case of, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is.
So how do you navigate that? How do you find mentors you can actually trust?
You have to be discerning, especially with so much information and misinformation out there. One big red flag is anyone promising unrealistic returns, or using a lot of jargon, trying to make things sound more complicated than they are.
So take your time, do your research.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to get a second opinion. It's your money. You have the right to be cautious.
Kiyosaki really stresses learning from people who've actually done it, people who've built real wealth, not just talked about it.
Like his rich dad. Not formally educated, but built a successful business. And he contrasts that with his own father, who had a PhD but struggled financially.
And he's also concerned about fatherlessness in America, how it impacts financial literacy.
He sees fathers, or positive male role models, as playing a huge role in guiding young people, teaching them about money.
It's about more than just, like, balancing a checkbook. It's about instilling those financial values, encouraging them to think like entrepreneurs.
To be resilient, to take risks.
So Kiyosaki's journey is pretty amazing, from self-publishing a book that no one wanted to, becoming this global phenomenon.
And it all started, at least in part, thanks to a chance encounter with an Amway distributor.
Talk about being in the right place at the right time.
It's a reminder that you never know what opportunities might come your way, and that persistence pays off.
And even with all his success, he's still going strong, talking about starting a network marketing system to teach capitalism globally.
He's got a mission, that's for sure, to spread his message of financial literacy.
So as we wrap up this part of our deep dives, it's time to think about what all this means for you.
What are your takeaways?
Kiyosaki throws out a lot of challenging ideas. Some you might agree with, some you might not. But it all comes back to this: taking control of your financial future.
It's about being informed, being proactive, and maybe even challenging some of those traditional assumptions about money.
Like his whole idea that a house isn't really an asset, does that shift your thinking about home ownership?
Yeah, it really makes you think about like, what are you actually trying to achieve? Are you looking for that cash flow, those income generating assets that Kiyosaki's always talking about?
It's almost like he's redefining success, right? It's not about just buying a big house and, having all this stuff. It's about building a life where money is working for you.
Exactly. And that's where financial literacy is so important. It's about having the knowledge, the tools to make smart decisions, not just doing what everyone else is doing.
Like understanding those financial statements, I mean, that's not something they teach you in high school.
Right. He's a big believer in going beyond the traditional education system. Find mentors, read books, do your own research.
And watch out for those get-rich-quick schemes. Remember that story about the book from the trunk of the car?
Oh, yeah. Always got to be skeptical.
If it sounds too good to be true.
It probably is. Protect your money. Do your due diligence.
So we've covered a lot of ground today. Economic warnings, unconventional investment strategies, emotional intelligence. But I think one of the biggest takeaways from Kiyosaki is, well, it's about mindset.
It's about taking control, not being a victim of circumstance.
He took a self-published book that no one wanted and turned it into a global bestseller.
Persistence, right?
And a willingness to challenge the status quo. He's not afraid to be controversial.
And that's inspiring, I think. It shows you that you don't have to follow the traditional path.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of Robert Kiyosaki, we want to leave you with this. Keep learning, keep asking questions, and don't be afraid to think differently. That's all for this episode of The Deep Dive. We'll see you next time.